All right, good morning, everybody. Today is Friday. Yay, Friday, January 29th, 2016. And this says, before the first cup of Jules here on UCY.TV, happy Friday, everybody. It is 26 degrees with light snow and pretty dark and gloomy here in upstate New York. But it is Friday, and that's all that matters. It makes me happy when we make it. All right, where do we leave off? Yesterday, we titled the show Mosquitoes, Brains, Viruses, and 21st Century Diagnosis. And yeah, we talked about Zika again and some of the nasty dotted line connections between some of the stuff that we're finding in our research. And I gotta say, I'm pretty excited because yesterday, I'm a part of an editorial group for anti-media. When I start seeing that there's stories being worked on, especially with stuff that I've been researching for quite a while, I get kind of excited. So yesterday I saw that Claire dropped something about Zika, and so I started sharing some links of the stuff that we've been digging up. And yeah, it's not just us, guys. And the fact that Oxitech release these genetically modified mosquitoes in the same location where we're now having this global pandemic. And trust me, this is turning into a monster very quickly. It's not just us that thinks that there's some strange coincidence. She found some proof yesterday. So I want to read. That's where we're going to start off today. And then we're going to spin off into some other topics because I'm kind of burnt out on Zika right now. Probably Monday. We'll get back to it. But I want to read Claire's article from yesterday because she did a phenomenal job trying to take like months of research and distilling it down into a somewhat short story. To kind of give an overview. Zika outbreak epicenter in the same area where GM mosquitoes released in 2015. It's on the antimedia.org, published yesterday. The World Health Organization announced it will convene an emergency committee under the international health regulations on Monday, February 1st, concerning the Zika virus's explosive spread throughout the Americas. The virus reportedly has a potential to reach pandemic proportions. And of course, we knew that. We've been waiting for the next pandemic, possibly around the globe. But understanding why this outbreak happened is vital to curbing it. As the WHO, World Health Organization statement said, quote, a causal relationship between Zika virus infections and birth malformations and neurological symptoms is strongly suspected. I actually had a video clip yesterday that said exactly what some of our documentation was showing, is that this is quote unquote suspected, but they have no proof of it. WHO is deeply concerned about this rapidly evolving situation for four main reasons: possible association of infection with birth malformations and neurological syndromes, which we found out was Guillain-Barré syndrome, potential for further international spread given the wide geographical distribution of the mosquito vector, the lack of population immunity in these newly affected areas, and the absence of vaccines. Woo. And we know that that's what the end result is all about. I want to point out to you something. So we dug into these Oxitech mosquitoes, and I had mentioned that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation had a dotted line back to Oxitech. Well, I found the original story back from 2010 with the whole Cayman Islands when they released these without telling anybody and without consent. So this is about a year ago, and this was titled November 16, 2010, GM Mosquito Trial, Strains Ties in Gates-Funded Project, and this is out of sciencemag.org. About a year ago, genetically modified mosquitoes were released into the wild, and they have been flying under the world's radar until last week. On November 11th, British company Oxitech announced that it carried out the world's first small outdoor trial with transgenic Aedes aegypti mosquitoes in the Caribbean islands of the Grand Cayman in the fall of 2009, followed by a larger study there last summer. The trials were designed to test whether such designer mosquitoes could be successfully used to fight wild mosquitoes that transmit diseases like dengue fever. The announcement, made at a press briefing in London, has taken aback opponents to GM mosquitoes and surprised many researchers in the field of genetic control of insect vectors. Some are questioning why the company stayed quiet for so long, calling it a strategic mistake that provides critics of genetic modification fresh ammunition. Yeah. What, that you let them out in secret and didn't tell anybody until later? Maybe. I don't think that they did themselves a favor, says Bart Knowles, a medical entomologist at the University of Amsterdam. This could well trigger a backlash. Well, yeah, you think, especially when there is now some good evidence that everything that they said were these males would impregnate the females and the offspring would die because what? Oh, there's no tetracycline in the environment. Well, Claire found something extremely interesting yesterday, and I'm hoping that I still have it up, and I might not, but that's okay. Because I read, oh yeah, I do. I do. I read it all yesterday. It was a document from Oxitech. All right, anyway. Says this could very well trigger a backlash. Luke Elfie, science chief officer at Oxitech, says that he completely rejects the notion that there was anything secretive about the trial, which was well known within the island's population of 50,000, but just not picked up internationally. Scientists have long debated how and when to carry out the very first genetic tests, release of transgenic mosquitoes designed to fight human disease, a landmark study they imagine might trigger fierce resistance from opponents of genetic engineering. Right, so let's do it in quiet and private and not tell anyone. A stream of papers and reports has argued that a release of any genetically modified mosquitoes should be preceded by years of careful groundwork, including an exhaustive public debate to win the hearts and minds of the local population. But little of that has been done in the trial of the Cayman Islands, Alfie says, because the government did not deem it necessary. Again, kickbacks and butt patting. Now, when it came out after this, that, they wanted to release the dengue mosquitoes in Florida to combat the 4 cases of dengue they had. Florida flipped out the keys, said no way, and now it's sitting with the USDA or the FDA, I don't remember which group it was, one of the U.S. regulatory agencies, waiting for approval. Back to the story. But the lack of public debate does not sit well with the collaborators in a big international project in which Oxitech is a key member. Now, this is an international project, mind you. A big international project in which Oxitech is a key member to develop and test genetically modified mosquitoes. So we have a very large international project to develop and test GM mosquitoes. Oxitech is a member, and the program is funded by a $19.7 million grant from who? The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Yes. As well as I found another document. It's also funded by the Wellcome Trust, which we've run into quite a few times in regards to pharmaceuticals and big oil and everything else. And with funding from the National Institute of Health and the National Institute of Health of Canada to come up with solutions to these 21st century, never before seen diseases. Now, dengue's been around, Zika's been around, but Zika hasn't been around like this, and it just blossomed out of nowhere, and all of a sudden could potentially be causing all these birth defects. Anyway, it's funded by a $19.7 million grant from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and led by Anthony James of the University of California, Irvine. Again, University of California system involved. And it has spent many years preparing a study site in the Mexican state of Chiapas for cage studies and a possible future release of another strain of Oxitech mosquito. The work includes extensive dialogues with citizen groups, regulators, academics, and farmers, And the project, one of Bill Gates's grand challenges in global health, would quote unquote never, ever, ever. I guess it really pissed off the Gates Foundation that they did this. So they're putting out like some official, the Bill Gates Foundation would never, ever, ever, and it's big in quotations, never release GM mosquitoes the way Oxitech has now in the Grand Cayman, says James. Oxitech has received $5 million from the Gates program, but the Grand Cayman trial is not a part of that. So they got to make sure they distance themselves. Yeah, they just paid for it. But then Oxitech went off on their own and released them making backdoor deals with the Cayman government and didn't tell anybody else. As a private company, Oxitech can push their own agenda, says James. Even though this could possibly hurt the field as a whole, it is a difficult situation, he says. Now, what concerns me is even beyond Oxitech, we are sprinkling all of this money to do the mad science research from rich tech billionaires, rich non-tech billionaires, and all this longevity project stuff, DARPA, federal government dollars, National Institute of Health, National Institute of Mental Health, the Science Foundation. And they're sprinkling this money at universities and bringing in, we found out over the last few days, these universities are bringing in corporations, the brightest and the best, from the business field to come work on these projects. And once they come up with a product, they come up with something they want to put into beta testing, they then spin it out into its own little company that, of course, everyone except for us get rich on. And they do things like this. They're their own company. So they are not beholden to those who paid for the research, apparently. So the company that is created then out of this venture funding is then their own entity to do with the technology whatever they want. Well, where are the controls on this? Where's the overarching body to keep an eye on this? Oh, wait, it's the World Health Organization, and they were involved. All right, let's get back here. So Oxitech's idea, pioneered by Elthie while at the University of Oxford in the 1990s, was to release a massive number of lab-bred male mosquitoes equipped with a gene that kills any offspring in the larval or pupal stage. By the way, I meant to mention that we found out yesterday, too, Oxitech is a spin-off. Like we were just saying, got some sprinkled dollars from everybody, came up with this technology, and then spun it off into its own corporation, but it's a spin-off from Oxford University. So yeah, they wanted to release massive numbers of lab-bred mosquitoes equipped with a gene that kills any offspring in the larval or pupal stage. And when the male mates with the female of a natural population, there is no progeny. And if the transgenic males mate more than the natural ones, the mosquito population will dwindle and even collapse. The first small field study designed to test whether the males can compete with their natural counterparts was done in Grand Cayman in November and December of 2009. A larger study between May and October of 2010 tested the insect's population suppressing powers, and in that study, the size of the population dropped by 80%, and they're calling it a complete success. Well, here's the thing. So if they drop by 80%, we found out yesterday, though, 80% isn't completely gone, and so you're still going to have more mosquitoes. And then they said, well, yeah, so we're going to have to keep releasing more genetically modified mosquitoes to keep this in check. Well, here's something that Claire dug up yesterday that was pretty incredible. It was a document from Oxitech itself. Oxford Insect Technologies is what Oxitech stands for. And it's titled Eliminating Tetracycline Contamination. It's talking about tetracycline that's in the environment. Now remember, these mosquitoes were engineered so that the larva would require tetracycline. And since tetracycline does not occur naturally in the environment, poof, they'd all die because they couldn't find it. We discovered in some of the stuff that we were digging in that the sewage, as well as the farm animals, are treated with antibiotics, a lot of times tetracycline. So there is tetracycline in the environment, and Oxitech knew that. This document is from 2009, I believe, if I can find it here. Well, we'll find it as we go along. I think I saw yesterday. This is from 2009. Eliminating tetracycline contamination. A document, Oxitech Limited Confidential Information. All right, let's find where this isn't going to be too technical. Tetracycline is very efficient at binding to and switching off the enhanced effect in the mosquito. Therefore, even a small amount of tetracycline can repress the system, which they're calling riddle. It's the system that they use to control the tetracycline. The molecular technology used in riddle, so this is their whole process for breeding and dying, is based on a positive feedback system that we can use to control. We can use tetracycline to control. The figure below, and there's some pictures, show the positive feedback system found in OX513, and that is the mosquito. Without tetracycline present, small amounts of the TTAV expressed from, and like I said, this gets kind of technical, the HSP70 minimal promoter are produced. It then binds to the test sites found in the front of the creature, whatever this is, blah, blah, blah. Tetracycline binds and prevents it from then reproducing. The tetracycline is very efficient at binding and switching off the enhancement effect. Therefore, even small amounts of tetracycline can repress the riddle system. So the riddle must actually be the kill switch. That's the self-destruct, don't reproduce or don't grow to adult. This was highlighted by a difference in results seen between our laboratory and a collaborator. They were getting a 15% survival rate of the transgenic mosquitoes, and we were only getting 3% in the lab. After a lot of testing and comparing experimental design, it was found that they used a cat food to feed the larva, and the cat food contained chicken. Well, it's well known that tetracycline is routinely used to prevent infections in chicken, especially in the cheap mass-produced chicken used for animal food. The chicken is heat-treated before being used, but this does not remove all the tetracycline. And this meant that a small amount of tetracycline was being added to the cat food and to the food of the mosquitoes, then getting to the larva and repressing the lethal kill switch system. To rear larvae that are free from tetracycline contamination, we recommend the following procedures to be used. So they're even finding that, like, when they're being born, they have tetracycline. This is horrifying because they had a 15% survival rate. If they're letting out all of these GMO mosquitoes that are supposed to have this kill switch to die before they grow to adulthood, and there's a potential for them to not die. And remember, that was like the big thing. Don't worry about it. They got a kill switch. Remember, we did a story about that a long time ago. And again, like I said, in the sewage, in the farm animals, now in cat food, probably in dog food and all kinds of other livestock and pet foods, there seems to be a large amount of tetracycline available in the environment. And especially since mosquitoes tend to sit around stinky water somewhere, like near sewage systems. Or again, remember, some of these antibiotics flush through your system and get into even the water, the brown, the gray water. It's available out there. You know, they should have picked like some rare earth mineral or some rare mineral that's up on a asteroid somewhere for these guys to require. Why would you pick tetracycline? Especially when we have this whole big thing going on now. Doctors have been over-prescribing antibiotics for so many years, and there's so many in the environment. They're shooting up animals left and right. It just seems ridiculous. Anyway, wash your hands before commencing any experiments. Always use the same larval diet as we use. Apparently not cat food laden with tetracycline. And use distilled, deionized water for rearing, right, to make sure there's no tetracycline in the water. Either have separate trays for non-tetracycline rearing, which are clearly marked, or use new disposable trays each time. Wash non-tetracycline trays in a separate sink to the tetracycline trays. And keep all tetracycline contaminated accessories away from the non-tetracycline experiments. Wow. So it's amazing that these people that are working on this highly advanced, very potentially dangerous, never before done before experiment with planet Earth, releasing transgenic insects into the wild to see what will happen. Seems like they are having trouble with basic lab procedures. Apparently, that Oxitech would have to put out a document like this telling them to wash your hands and keep contaminated lab gear away from non-contaminated lab gear. Like, what? This isn't an official document. With adults, we do not provide a source of tetracycline in the sugar water because this can contaminate the eggs of the next generation. So if the male mosquitoes come into contact with tetracycline, they can contaminate the eggs of the next generation in several ways. Direct transfer to the egg paper by residual amounts of tetracycline on the insect's legs. Oh, really? Yes, as well as transfer to the eggs from the female and transfer to the feces of a blood meal to the egg paper. So the male mosquito can transfer tetracycline if he's been in water that has it or whatever to the new eggs that are supposed to not have any tetracycline and be the kill switch. When a line needs to be reared without tetracycline, it is best to do the following to get tetracycline-free offspring to analyze. Rear your transgenic line on tetracycline and separate out about 10 males. Cross these males with the wild type of females and collect the eggs, and then rear the eggs without tetracycline and analyze. Do not use females from your transgenic line because these can pass tetracycline accumulated as larvae to the embryos. What? Yes, they can pass it. So guys, they knew that there was a problem. And if these experiments weren't done absolutely perfectly correctly, keeping this tetracycline contamination away from these genetically modified mosquitoes, that the experiment wasn't going to work and their kill switch wasn't going to work. But they let them out into the wild even after researchers were going, well, wait a second. And we read some of that way back when. Wait a second. You know, if you're having a survival rate, maybe there's a problem and we shouldn't let them go. And they did it anyway in the Cayman Islands. All right, so back to this Cayman Island story. So that was out of an Oxitech document that they had published. Back to this Cayman Island story, talking about their release and not telling anyone. The World Health Organization, this is in 2010, is drafting guidelines for the release of transgenic mosquitoes, a process that will take approximately 3 more months, says Yiya Toure, manager of the Innovative Vector Control Interventions at WHO. Did you know that they had a group called that? World Health Organization has a group called Innovative Vector Control Inventions. Toure says that he knew of the trial in the Grand Cayman, and he was not aware of any wrongdoing by Oxitech. I saw that they actually had a couple other places where they let stuff go and it wasn't known, and there may be some legal implications there. Medical entomologist William Takken of Wageningen University in the Netherlands points out that while transgenic, Oxitec's mosquitoes are programmed to not have offspring, right, if there's no tetracycline. which makes it extremely unlikely that any newly introduced genes would spread, which is one of the major concerns of GM opponents. But environmental groups are lamenting what they see as a lack of openness. If these mosquitoes are completely safe, then why the hush-hush, says Gurman Singh, chair of the Center for Environment, Technology and Development in Malaysia, where Oxitech hopes to start field trials soon. That was from 2010. And now we have this global pandemic. Obama has opened all the stops now. We are putting this on the front agenda to be able to get some vaccines made. This is so disgusting. All right, we're going to finish Claire's story now, the one that she did yesterday in Anti-Media. So the World Health Organization has now come out saying that this could be a global pandemic, but they were part of the funding. That's what gets me. They were part of the funding of these transgenic mosquitoes to begin with, and they were fully aware. We just found out from that last document. They were fully aware that there are issues and that these are being released into the environment. The World Health Organization is deeply concerned about this rapidly evolving situation. The level of concern is high, as is the level of uncertainty. Zika seemingly exploded out of nowhere, though it was first discovered in 1947. I believe it was in monkeys I was reading. Cases only sporadically occurred throughout Africa and southern Asia. In 2007, the first case was reported in the Pacific, and in 2013, a small smattering of outbreaks and individual cases were officially documented in Africa as well as the Western Pacific. But they also began to show up in the Americas. And in May of 2015, Brazil reported its very first case of Zika virus, and then the situation changed dramatically. Brazil is now considered the epicenter of the Zika outbreak, which coincides with at least 4,000 reports now of babies born with microencephaly just since October. And when examining a rapidly expanding potential epidemic, it is necessary to leave no stone unturned. So possible solutions as well as future prevention will be as effective as possible. And in that vein, there was also another significant development in 2015. Yes, Oxitech first unveiled its large-scale genetically modified mosquito farm in Brazil in July of 2012, with the goal of reducing the incidence of dengue fever as the disease daily reported. Dengue fever is spread by the same Aedes aegypti mosquito which spreads Zika, and though they cannot fly more than 400 meters, the WHO stated, it may inadvertently be transported by humans from one place to another. And you know what's even more interesting, and I'd like to know, is there potentially a high incidence of tetracycline prescriptions given out in Brazil? By July 2015, shortly after the GM mosquitoes were first released into the wild in Juazeiro, Brazil, just where we said, it's up in the northeastern section, Oxitech proudly announced that they had successfully controlled the Aedes aegypti mosquito that spread dengue, chikungunya, and the Zika virus by reducing their target population by more than 90%. And though that might sound like astounding success, there is an alarming possibility to consider. The effort to control dengue, Zika, and other viruses appears to have backfired dramatically. And the particular strain of Oxitech mosquito, the OX513A, we just read about them, were genetically altered so that the vast majority of the offspring will die before they mature. Though Dr. Ricarda Steinbrecher published concerns in a report in September 2010 that a known survival rate of 3 to 4%, and that's a document we just read, 3 to 4% warranted further study before the release of the GM insects. Her concerns, which were echoed by several other scientists both at the time and since, and we read one of those, appear to have been ignored, though they should not have been. Those genetically modified mosquitoes work to control wild, potentially disease-carrying populations in a very specific manner. Only the male modified Aedes mosquito are supposed to be released into the wild, as they will mate with their unaltered female counterparts. Once offsprings are produced, the modified scientific facet is supposed to, quote unquote, kick in and kill the larva before it reaches breeding age. If tetracycline is not present during its development, but there is a problem. And this is the document. According to an unclassified document from the Trade and Agricultural Directorate Committee for Agriculture dated February 2015. Oh, here we go. Brazil is the third largest in, quote, global antimicrobial consumption in food and animal production, meaning Brazil is the third in the world for its use of tetracycline in its food for animals. Oh, well, that makes a lot of sense now. And as a study by the American Society of Agronomy explained, it is estimated that approximately 75% of antibiotics are not absorbed by the animals and are excreted in their waste. One of the antibiotics, or antimicrobials specifically named in that report for its environmental persistence, is tetracycline. Guys, how could they not have known this? They have an entire whole now push federally in the United States to reduce the use of antibiotics because of antibiotic resistance. They also have a huge global thing going on about that. Maybe that antibiotic resistance thing and cutting back on antibiotics for people is all so they can release the hounds. I don't know, but how could they not have known this? And they knew it in the documents already in the lab, but how could they not know that there are antibiotics everywhere in the environment and in the agricultural system? In fact, as a confidential internal Oxitech document is divulged in 2012, so that's where that came out, that last one we just read, survival rate could be as high as 15%, even with low levels of tetracycline present. Even in small amounts of tetracycline can repress the engineered lethality. Indeed, that 15% survival rate was described by Oxitech. Even absent this tetracycline, as Steinbrecher explains, a subpopulation of genetically modified Aedes mosquitoes could theoretically develop and thrive, in theory, quote, capable of surviving and flourishing despite any further release of pure GM mosquitoes which still have the gene intact. She added, quote, that the effectiveness of the system also depends on the genetically designed late onset of the lethality. If the time of onset is altered due to environmental conditions, then a 3 to 4% survival rate represents a much bigger problem, unquote. And yeah, a story came out yesterday. Now El Nino. Now they're going to blame it on El Nino. I told you, global warming. As the WHO stated in its press release, conditions associated with this year's El Nino weather pattern are expected to increase mosquito populations greatly in many areas. And there all night long stories were coming out about Zika. They're ramping this up full blown, people. Incidentally, Obama called now for a massive research effort to develop a vaccine for the Zika virus, as one currently does not exist. Brazil has now called in 200,000 soldiers to somehow help combat the virus's spread, and the Aedes mosquito have reportedly now been spotted in the UK. But perhaps the most ironic, or not, proposition was proffered on January 19th by the MIT Technology Review, and we read this story. An outbreak in the Western Hemisphere could give countries, including the United States, new reasons to try wiping out mosquitoes with genetic engineering. Yes, they are now suggesting to engineer new genetically modified mosquitoes specifically to wipe out the Zika virus. Yesterday, the Brazilian city of Icabacabacá said it would expand its use of the genetically modified mosquitoes, and the GM mosquitoes were created by Oxitech. a British company recently purchased by Interexon. Yes, we talked about them as well. A synthetic biology company based in Maryland. The company said it has released insects in parts of Brazil and the Cayman Islands to battle dengue fever. And in my digging, we discovered that the Davos Forum last week, Sanofi just announced the very first vaccine for dengue, which was a big deal. And then I saw that they were just cleared of some charges in France that they were accused of by investors for some sort of monetary kickback scheme. And I had only been joking about Brazil kind of selling out their women and wondering who got kickbacks. But now we find out that the makers of the dengue vaccine have been accused of kickbacks. So just like I was joking about them sending out the troops to fight Zika, I guess that wasn't a joke either, because that happened as well. All right, so I think I'm Zika'd out. What about you guys? There's a whole week of Zika. We'll see where it leaves us on Monday. Sure, it'll be a full-blown pandemic by then. Let's talk about more mad science. This was an oddity. I was a little disturbed by this story. This came out of Yahoo News, so very, very mainstream, homogenized for people who don't pay attention, but it made me raise an eyebrow. There's a picture of two girls, and they look like twins. If I didn't know any better, I would say they were twin girls. It's January 21st, 2016. Doppelgangers take a DNA test to find out if they are related, and they're surprised by the results. Two twin strangers from Ireland who never knew the other existed until 2 months ago recently took a DNA test to find out if they were related. The results absolutely surprised both of them, according to Naimif Girney, who added that she and her doppelganger, Irene Adams, could not believe the results. Guinea, who is from Dublin, Ireland, told ABC News that she first connected with Adams, who's from Sligo, Ireland, this past November, after friends of Adams told her she looked like that, quote, doppelganger girl on the news, unquote. Coincidentally, a friend of Adams' brother also contacted Gurney about the same time, so we got in touch, met up, and it was absolutely surreal to see yet another one of my doppelgangers in the flesh, says Guinea 27. She explained that Adams 28 is actually the third, yes, the third doppelganger that she has discovered so far since creating Twin Strangers, a website and tool that uses facial recognition software to match you to a potential lookalike. We clicked instantly, she said, and just like my second doppelganger, she not only looked exactly like me, but she also acted exactly like me, Guinea said. It was like watching myself. Our facial expressions are exactly the same. Our eyes and nose crinkle exactly the same way. We smile the same. We also talk, and she talks with her hands just like me. Dozens of users commented on the video of Gurney and Adams' meetup, suggesting that the two should get a DNA test since the both of them were from Ireland and could actually be, quote, 10th cousins or related somewhere down the line, unquote. You know, and I was thinking, well, maybe there was an adoption that happened, but then they were born a year apart. And then I started thinking X-Files stuff. What was that? Eve 11. I don't know if you remember that episode, but you know, with all this in vitro fertilization and there's all these stray eggs laying around, and there never really has been a lot of legality about what's to happen with those eggs. I guess there's a destroy order, but do you really know if things are destroyed? And then you have hospitals taking cord blood when you give birth to a baby and DNA swabs. You never know. And what's interesting too, up in Ireland and England is where they were messing around with Dolly the sheep clone, remember? So the fact that this chick has now met 3 exact duplicates of herself that look just like her, talk just like her, have all of her same quirks and facial expressions, it's just beyond belief. But check this out. So yeah, let's go get the DNA test. So this past December, the two went to the National DNA Testing Center, DNA Ireland. So I guess they got a whole DNA center where they gave samples of their saliva. And the samples were used for 3 tests that determined the probability of the two being sisters, half-sisters, or related at all based on the lineage traced up to about 20,000 years ago. Below are the results, which were delivered earlier this month to Gurney and Adams. Probability of being full siblings? There's only a 0.0006% chance that the two had the same parents. Probability of being half siblings. There was only a 0.1% chance that the two shared one parent. Probability of sharing a common ancestor up to 20,000 years ago. Rather than a percentage, this test gives the user their haplogroup, which is a letter assigned to a genetic population of a group of people who share common ancestors on a patrilineal or a matrilineal line. Jeannie had haplogroup H, and Adams had haplogroup T. There's no relation whatsoever. How is that even possible? How is that even possible? Gurney said, we were shocked. We thought, okay, we definitely have to have relatives from the same place somewhere down the line, but that was not the case. Gurney added that she believes the test has quote unquote fascinating implications. Oh, I bet. And that the test could suggest that quote unquote doppelgangers are real. In fact, a mysterious phenomenon. And I'm going to add to that, mysterious phenomenon that came from mad science gone mad lab experiments somewhere. How could she have 3 exact lookalikes that are just like her? And this is even weird, like in the same area and have no relation 20,000 years back at all? Come on. That sounds to me like somebody found a way to scramble things up so they could make clones without there being any proof that there were clones or something. I don't know. That's just beyond bizarre. All right, so staying on the bizarre mad science. This is out of Daily Mail. Scientists who have grown a human ear on the back of a rat, and there's a picture, it's horrifying, say that they will be able to use them in humans in 5 years. So no more growing it on your arm. Now we're going to grow it on the back of a poor little ratty. It looks awful. Human ears. And why are we just using scaffolding in like some fluid in a petri dish? Human ears could be grown to order within 5 years, claim Japanese scientists who have unveiled a rat with an ear on its back. The Tokyo and Kyoto University technology could be used to help children. Of course, it's always for the children. Could be used to help children born with facial abnormalities, as well as youngsters mauled by dogs. Adults, including soldiers injured in battle, of people who have suffered accidents, could also benefit. At the moment, replacement ears are sculpted from cartilage taken from the patient's ribs. However, the multiple operations are needed. Plus, the removal of the cartilage is painful, and the chest never fully heals. In contrast, the new technique would require just a small amount of sample cells as a starting material. Plus, the finished ear would be a living thing and should grow with the child. The scientists began by turning human stem cells, master cells, into cartilage cells, and then the lab-grown cartilage was then formed into tiny balls and placed inside of plastic tubes shaped like a human ear on the rat's back. After 2 months, the framework dissolved, which we talked about that. That's that sugar framework. The framework dissolved, leaving behind what looks like a 2-inch ear laying flat against the animal's back. The technique is one of several being perfected around the world in the aim of making bespoke replacements for body parts damaged by accidents, ravaged by disease, or malformed at birth. Doctors in London have grown a nose from scratch. Oh, yeah, we saw the nose. There was the nose growing in the guy's forehead, but it always makes me think of the Woody Allen movie Sleeper, where they were trying to bring back the supreme leader with a nose in a petri dish. Doctors, oh yeah, and on the guy's arm they had a nose too. Doctors in London have grown a nose from scratch using a patient's arm to nurture it rather than a rat's back. They have also built an artificial windpipe and say that they eventually it may even be possible to grow an entire face in the lab. And speaking about faces, I posted, and actually it was pretty recently, there was a photo from one of the transhumanist groups that I subscribe to where the scientist used his DNA to create, and let me get up there because I want to read this. He used his DNA to create a 3D representation of his face, and we know that artist in New York City was doing that. Oh, here we go. No, actually, he wasn't. Well, I guess. All right. Well, here's another way. He wasn't using his DNA, but that artist in New York City was. She was using DNA from chewing gum and cigarette butts to then grow representations of the people's faces that drop the gum and the cigarette butts and then turn them into like sculptures of faces. Well, this dude created a 3D scan and then printed with a 3D printer a face of himself, of the inventor of the hollow build scanning system. And this picture of this face it looks so realistic. It's even got like all the shading, the coloring, and his wrinkles and his freckles and everything. It looks like a human face just carved off of the head. It says this is not a mold. It is printed out of the printer in color, shown with all of the texture and the skin as it appears. So the name of that company is Hollow Build Scanning System, and maybe we'll hit them on Monday because that looks really frightening. So yeah, they will be able to print faces soon. All right, another mad science. Yes, we can rebuild him. Australian scientists are beginning trials of fully implantable bionic eyes. This could restore vision to millions worldwide. Scientists in Australia are set to begin trials of a new bionic eye system that is expected to give patients vision several times better than current vision restoration technologies. The Phoenix 99 bionic eye, developed by engineers at the University of South Wales, is a fully implantable system that represents a number of world firsts in neural stimulation technology. The device, which has been successfully demonstrated in preclinical work by a team of elite surgical experts around Sydney, recently received funding, a funding boost to help scientists move toward the next stage of research, which is human implantation. Guys, it's like all stops out. This, we do this stuff every day, and every day I just get more and more depressed. I mean, it all stops out. And of course, these scientists are really, really excited. Oh, yes, we are, by the first trials, because it proved the technology and implementation techniques work. Said one of the inventors of the system, patients learn to use the technology in the same way that a person with an implanted, implanted with a cochlear ear implant learns to hear electrical impulses. The team at the University of South Wales has been researching bionic eye technology since 1997 with the goal of restoring sight to people with retinitis pigmentosa, the leading cause of blindness in younger people, and age-related macular degeneration. Retinitis pigmentosa is a degenerative condition that affects up to 2 million people globally. The condition, which often represents patients in their 30s, can lead to complete blindness in 10 years. While medications can slow its progress, they are expensive and only available in developed countries, and scientists still don't know how to reverse the degeneration. But one way of restoring sight to people afflicted by retinitis pigmentosa could be via bionic vision. And in 2012, The University of South Wales engineers were part of a team that trialed an earlier, partially implanted prototype device with 3 patients with retinitis pigmentosa. The prototype consisted of 24 electrode arrays with external electronics that allowed the patient users to see spots of light called phosphenes, and with the help of special cameras, the users could also get a sense of distance, with the phosphenes appearing brighter when still objects were closer. You know, I will guarantee you that this University of South Wales is receiving funding for brain projects. Because remember, optic nerves connect direct to the brain. In contrast to this earlier prototype, the new Phoenix 99 device that the researchers intend to begin trialing with patients soon are fully implantable and are expected to enable significantly better vision than the previous technology. Swanning and fellow co-inventor Nigel Lovell plan to implant the Phoenix 99 in up to a dozen patients over the next 2 years. Surgery required to implant the bionic eye only takes about 2 to 3 hours, after which point the only sign of implant is a small disc behind the ear that transmits power and data to the device, which in turn delivers electrical impulses to the back of the eye. The user also wears a pair of glasses equipped with a small camera, and the images captured by that camera help to define the stimulation of the nerve cells in the patient's retina, sending signals to the visual cortex of the brain. According to the researchers, their bionic eye system has potential to restore visions to millions worldwide. Oh, yes, it's going to make lots of money. And in addition to those affected by retinitis pigmentosa globally, many millions more have age-related macular degeneration. The team has just received 1.1 million Australian dollars in new funding from the National Health and Medical Research Council, but scientists say they need up to an additional $10 million over the next 5 years to help take the research to the next level and get the bionic eye into mainstream clinical practice. You can donate to the project here. I mean, are they freaking kidding me? And they got a link. And let's hope that they are successful in securing this money. Well, why don't they hit up some... Oh, I just killed my next story. Why don't they hit up some of the tech billionaires who want to live forever, would be my thought. All right, well, where are we going to go from here? I don't know. I just killed my next story. That was dumb. Well, I guess we'll just continue in line here. No, not going to do that. All right, here we go. This will be the last one. Study suggests that the internet could out-evolve humanity. It's not so sci-fi after all, it says. Living things accumulate and reproduce information. And that's really the driving principle behind life and behind evolution. But humans have invented a new method of accumulating and reproducing information. It's digital information, and it's growing at an astonishing speed. And the number of people using the internet is growing, as are the devices connected through the Internet of Things. Digital information can copy itself perfectly. Increasing in copy number with every download or view, can be modified and mutated and combined to generate novel information packets. Can be expressed through artificial intelligence. And these are all characteristics similar to living things. So should we start thinking about digital technology as being like an organism that can evolve? Digital information replicates with virtually no energy cost, and it has rapid generation times. Artificial intelligence can beat us in chess and on game shows. And what's more, it's faster than us, smarter than us in some arenas, and is already in charge of activities that are too complex for us to do efficiently. To biologists, that sounds like the digital world might be able to outcompete us, as we argue in a paper published in Trends in Ecology and Evolution. Any newly evolving entity can cause upheavals for life on Earth. In fact, all the major evolutionary transitions in the history of life have come about via changes to information storage and transmission. And the digital revolution has certainly changed the way information is stored and transmitted. Current storage capacity of the internet is approaching 10 to the 24 bytes and is growing at 30 to 40% per year, showing no signs of slowing down. And in the 3.7 billion years since life began, information in living things, i.e. our DNA, has reached the equivalent of about 10 to the 37 bytes. Digital information will grow to this size in less than 100 years, and that is an evolutionary blink of an eye. During each evolutionary transition, there have been winners and losers, and we need to start asking if the digital transition poses a danger to humanity. You think so? We do have the advantage of hindsight to answer this question. We know that each of Earth's evolutionary transitions is essentially resulted in the enslavement of the old information carriers. Well, hey, guess what? RNA was the original carrier of information, and when DNA came along, the role of RNA was regulated to simply relaying messages from DNA to the cell. Well, hey, now as we're becoming mad science gods, and we're enslaving DNA with our CRISPR technologies, all digital, putting DNA on a screen, cut and paste, I'm going to say that we are in some deep shit. All right, guys, well, if you can even believe it, we knocked a Friday out of the park. That went pretty fast, man. Make sure you stick around, though, because it is Friday night. Mr. Josh is up live at 6. We have Ms. Lonnie Clark live next at 11 a.m. And then tonight we have Primer Time, Best of, Truth on the Tracks, Best of, Cutting Through the Matrix with Alan Watt, Best of, all this week, and then Live Levon at 11 p.m. Eastern. Make sure you stick around for this weekend, too. All new shows that I still need to cut, but they will be all new. And then I'll be back on Monday. All right, guys, make sure you have an awesome Friday, awesome weekend, and I will catch up with you on Monday, everybody. Take care.